My name is Fred Kate.
Never met him.
I'm a I'm a professor at Indiana University's Maurer School of Law. I was the founding director of the Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research there. And I have the good fortune to have lived long enough that the subjects that we're talking about, which I used to have to explain to people, now they get it. Every taxi driver has a thought about privacy or security, AI, one of these advanced technology issues. Extremely honored to be joined today by just a superb panel. And really starting immediately on my right, Senator Todd Young. Todd was initially a member of the House from Indiana before he became a senator, and in the US Senate has established a leadership role working across the aisle on science and technology issues. So CHIPS and Science Act, that was Senator Young's. The bipartisan Senate group on AI, that was Senator Young. The pending legislation on AI and security, that was Senator Young. So we're honored to have you. We couldn't think of anyone better in Washington or elsewhere to talk about these issues. And then I'm just gonna, I was said I would give my panelists a chance to introduce themselves, but as long as I'm on a roll, I'm just gonna keep going. And then you can still introduce or add what you want. Amy Brown, who brings a distinguished career in both public and private service, working with health data, health information, health insurance information, and now is the founder and CEO of Authentics, which you can explain in far better detail than I can, but I love the way it's described actually in Fortune magazine, and I love the fact it's in Fortune magazine, about helping humans understand humans. And I think that's very much at the core of our discussion today. And then on Amy's right is Stan Crosley, who is, of course, a graduate of the Maurer School of Law, which is pretty much all I need to say for his credentials. He served as the first chief privacy officer at Eli Lilly and Company. Today, he heads the Crosley Law Firm, and along with me, works in Red Barn, a strategic consulting company that works helping companies understand their data and how to use it responsibly and aggressively. Our topic is ethics and governance of AI. I'm going to start with Senator Young, and I think you've just lived through this year-long process of bringing in some of these phenomenal experts to talk with the Senate about questions around AI. What do you see as the greatest challenges that you worry about or you see the Senate as needing to deal with?
Well, it's unlocking the potential that so many of us sense is inherent in this technology. It is, first imagining a world in which debilitating diseases like Alzheimer's, like cancer, can be cured in the next decade or two. It's imagining a world in which we literally solve the problem of traffic by combining the power of AI technologies with smart infrastructure. It's a world in which every child in the world might have access to an individualized, best-in-class tutor to help them become more productive, to realize their dreams. So how do we unlock, from a public policy standpoint, those opportunities? Is it doing nothing? And sometimes strong arguments are made for that. Is it heavy-handed prescriptive regulation? No, it's neither of those poles. It's trying to ensure that the innovation that has long been happening and is really being supercharged right now as we realize the potential of AI technology and as we see breakthroughs in microprocessor development, it is realizing that potential while addressing trust and transparency issues and while dealing with some of the tail and risks that we have. And so that's the balance that, from a public policy standpoint, we're trying to strike. It begins with starting with existing law. We have laws around intellectual property, around consumer protection, around all kinds of risks or perceived risks that might become more apparent in an AI-enabled world. But we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Presumably, our values as it relates to, for example, privacy or discrimination against certain racial and ethnic groups, are already embedded in our statutes, in our case law, in our regulations. So let's start there let's start there, not regard this technology as something different in terms of protecting those values, and then let's see where challenges emerge or where gaps exist in our existing law. We've been through this process, which I may have an opportunity to get into a bit later, myself, Senator Schumer, Senator Heinrich, and Rounds, and we came up with 30 pages of thoughts, reflections, recommendation, and sort of visioning informed by months of conversations with leading minds about AI, its challenges and opportunities. So we've begun there, we've identified gaps, but we're just in the early stage of this process. I will say that within government, we're going to need a lot more expertise, and I'm not offering myself to deliver it, but we need subject matter expertise, people who are conversant in and knowledgeable about AI in every department of government. And then we need some really strong expertise sort of available within government to all of those other individuals. And we need to do so on an ongoing basis. So that's going to require different compensation structures and a different sort of human resources thinking as it relates to government service than any of us are used to. And I think that's a good starting point, perhaps, for our conversation.
So if I may, I just want to ask one quick follow-up question. We'll get everyone in, but I want to make sure we don't run out of time on this. Because
sure.
I read
felt like I was too long already, so
Oh,
sorry.
goodness, no.
I know Amy's saying, oh, God, I'm next to a senator. This guy's going to be talking forever.
No. She's going to be just fine. We, one thing we've seen out of a lot of European countries is they issue a report on all the opportunities for AI and how we need to invest more in it. And on the same day, they issue a report on the desperate challenge of AI and why we need to suppress it, and it's really going to be a problem, and let's regulate it. And one of the things that's been striking about the Senate approach is you've looked at both sides at the same time. Are you optimistic going forward that it will be possible to continue that? In other words, to not get that overreaction on one end or the other, either?
Well, I am. I mean, because we had Martin Heinrich and Chuck Schumer agreeing with Todd Young and Mike Rounds and coming up with a consensus 30-page document of very specific recommendations, very specific bills that we recommended Congress immediately pass and send to the president to become law. And we begin with the adoption of voluntary standards. We don't end there. I would never advocate ending there. And there's some near-term base hits, fairly obvious sort of risks, not of an existential nature, that can help be mitigated through smart public policy. But most of our near-term action requires setting up a construct. We propose NIST to interface with national security luminaries, with members of civil rights organizations, but most importantly with the development community and users to come up with performance benchmarks, voluntary standards, and so forth. And then that's where you begin, but of course, again, not where we end.
Thank you very much. Now, Amy, you've got this incredibly a wide array of practical experience here. So I'm curious, first of all, just say a word more about what Authentics does. And second of all, what do you see as like the great opportunity or the great risk here? You can do both or neither or whatever you want to do.
Sure. So thank you. It's great to be here. I feel like the perspective I can bring to this conversation is I'm kind of where the rubber meets the road. We started our business, Authentics, in 2018 when AI was just the public conversation was pretty confused about what it was. It felt very mysterious. And so I've been in the front seat as our company has grown to see how the market reacts to AI. And we absolutely have seen both what you were saying, Fred, we have to adopt this right now, and also, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? We need to stop and make sure we have governance in place. So it's been a really interesting journey for my company. Authentics, very simply, we take in voice data. Think of, when you call customer service and you hear this call may be recorded for quality purposes. We take in hundreds of millions of those recorded conversations, and analyze them at scale using machine learning, deep learning, generative AI, and good old school NLP. We believe in right tool for the job. So we spend a lot of time working with healthcare enterprises to understand what business problems they're actually trying to solve, and then we help marry that up with AI that can help them solve that. So we are a SaaS company, AI company based here in Indiana.
Okay, so as you look forward, do you see a wonderful horizon, or do you see terror and fear?
Well, like the senator said, I'm optimistic, but our position is to try to be the adults in the room throughout the whole process, right? And so to try to catch a balance between responsibility and being very, very intentional about how you're building AI and making sure we're following NIST standards, and we appreciated those standards because they helped us kind of be able to articulate to the market how we are developing our AI product. And so I'm hopeful, but I will say that we're still in a stage where the market that we serve, which is, again, big corporations, they're still trying to figure it out in terms of what to expect from AI, what they can expect, what humans' role is in relation to AI. I think a lot of C-suites have said, hey, go implement AI because we're expecting next quarter to have massive savings. And we try to be a really responsible tech company to say, like, okay, let's map out what you should expect, what you need in place to have proper governance around your AI product and purchase, and then let's map out what a true ROI is for your purchase and investment in AI. So we're trying to maintain kind of that educational consultative approach with the market as they sort through all the hype.
Great, thank you. And Stan, you both work with big companies in healthcare and with small companies in healthcare, but one of the things I've actually heard you talk about before is often the conflict between objectives. So both the objectives of the company, like I want to do this and I want to save money all at the same time, but also the conflicts that regulators often face. So like we want to restrict your access to data in order to protect privacy, but then we want the AI to be accurate. Well, of course, without data, that's very hard. So do you want to talk a little bit about that conflict, or did I confuse you with somebody else?
No, I think that was perfect. I think you just want me to be the counterbalance to all the optimism we've heard so far. And so, and I'm able to do that. I think that if we start and look at current laws and regulations that are on the books, every other country has kind of gotten it wrong in that they at the same time, like the EU AI Act, perfect example. They have a provision in the EU AI Act that says we recognize that for auditing purposes and monitoring, we need to allow you to collect sensitive data so you can detect if bias exists in the algorithms. But guess what? You can't collect sensitive data except with explicit consent in Europe in order to build the algorithm, to train the algorithm. And so now you have the ability to check for bias, which is almost certainly going to be there because you couldn't get the sensitive data like race, ethnicity, children's data in order to develop the algorithm correctly in the first place. And so we have this collision. And we're also, the U.S. has never had a comprehensive privacy law like Europe has. We've had efforts to pass it, but in the gap, we now have 20 states with privacy laws. 17 of those states require explicit consent for the collection of sensitive data, which includes race, ethnicity, gender identity, children's. There's a reason why face identification technologies, when they came out onto the market, were horribly bad at recognizing people of color and youth, right? Children could pass the phone to each other and open it up because the technology wasn't trained on youth. It was almost impossible to get the data. And so, this is an opportunity for the U.S. to kind of create this balance that you talked about, Fred, where we create a federal law that certainly recognizes the risks that exist here, but then builds in tools like an exception if you're going to train with data or learn with data versus act on data. So if I'm going to use a huge data set to develop an algorithm, but I'm not going to use it to target you to do something, that's a huge difference. And there's an opportunity for us to have a law that recognizes that difference, allows us to correct the bias and still protect sensitivity of the data. And we just haven't seen a law do that well yet. The GDPR tried, and it's been defeated at every turn on interpretation.
So let me agree, and I saw Amy nodding her head affirmatively as well. That's a real challenge. It's a challenge for developers. It's also a challenge for consumers. Not having a national data privacy standard is something Congress has failed to pass and put into law for a number of years running. It preceded by a long measure the ChatGPT moment, but as we've seen the opportunities associated with this technology already starting to bubble up in various impressive ways, as we learn more, somewhat speculatively, about the implications all of this is going to have on our way of life, this AI revolution, so to speak. I think that should focus the mind of members of Congress and persuade us to maybe take what in the near term are very difficult actions and hold difficult conversations, because we're really trying to reconcile our existing views about privacy and what can and cannot be shared with the many upside opportunities associated with this technology. The House of Representatives passed a data privacy bill, passed it over to the Senate. It has not gotten a hearing in the Senate, so we have some work to do on this front. This is probably where you begin when you think about, I mentioned gap filling as it relates to our existing laws. You probably need to begin here. The state of Indiana, in the absence of that, and 19 other states have done their own gap filling, and that's helpful, but our job is to facilitate interstate commerce. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, we need to do that.
The reason I was nodding my head is because that conflict of wanting highly accurate, contextually valid, rich insights, data, AI algorithms versus, oh, but you can't have any training data to actually help you achieve that. We face that in the market all the time. Absolutely. From our buyers, right? So I'm seeing it firsthand, and it's often when a deal gets to the final procurement stage and you have info security meeting up with a business buyer and you see these conflicts happening, right? And it has major implications for us as an AI company, right? And we're trying to educate the market on the difference between training data for insights and training purposes versus that targeting to act. And I think more clarity around that would be super helpful to companies like ours.
If I could just say one other thing, Fred, I think that the other issue we have with state laws and with European law in particular is that there are so many administrative tasks involved. You have to have magic language on your privacy statements. You have to have magic language in your notices in order for them to be valid. And so companies have put enormous resources in addressing these types of tasks. Well, at the same time, the real risks, the real harms that we care about as a society are largely going unchecked because we don't have the resources to throw to those. And so, we've got this convergence that's occurring that makes no sense, that practical people, if you sit back, like the senator, and say, we have gaps that we have to close. It really is an essential moment, I think, for the US. If we want to be competitive, the privacy law done right that preempts the states and allows for the collection of data for training algorithms, even sensitive data with certain controls, could put us a decade ahead of other countries. I can't see how AI development is going to occur in most of Europe.
Send me your drafts, Dan. I think that's our job. But if you, seriously, if anyone has recommendations about how we can identify that sweet spot, I'm all ears, as Ross Perot once said.
So it seems like one challenge in AI is one opportunity, but it's got a challenge, and that is that we not repeat the errors of the past. And so, either the failure to act at the federal level when maybe federal action on privacy would have been a good thing. Again, dangerous if you act too early or dangerous if you act too broadly. You could stifle innovation. But my impression is, and again, you could correct me, Amy, that business wants a certain amount of certainty before it starts investing in an area. So there's going to be a big regulatory shift. It'd be nice to know that as soon as possible. What tools might we be looking at in AI other than the ones that we may have over-relied on in privacy, like notice and choice? I've never understood why I need a notice whether AI was used or not. If I'm denied credit or if I'm disadvantaged in some way, it doesn't much matter to me the tool that did it. What tools do you anticipate, Senator?
There may be an exception to that as it relates to imagery.
Of course.
We're debating right now the merits, the demerits of watermarking. For example, we're trying to deal with deep fakes in some pretty uncomfortable use cases. You've all read the news. So, but I agree. We should have sort of a technology agnostic approach to most things. I can be persuaded otherwise as it relates to discrete areas. But I think we should take that approach. As it relates to data, my hope is, as you indicate, we provide some measure of ownership to people, and they're aware when their data is being collected, and then maybe through the marvel of innovation, we can get to a point where people can trace, if they offer use of their data, trace exactly how it is ultimately used, which would be quite exciting. So those are some reflections.
I think it would be helpful just to have more kind of risk profiling in terms of like, what is the use of this data, and does it fall in a high risk, a moderate, or low risk? And being able to use that, at least in my business, will help just kind of pave the way. We have tools today like high trust certification, HIPAA certification, SOC 2, Type 2, being able to have some sort of way to kind of establish where we fit with our solution and what level of risk that is, and being transparent about that, so that users or customers know, we're really at least in our business, we're leveraging your data to help the healthcare system work better. So we are listening to you, but we're not trying to target you and take an action to you specifically. And it's hard to sort through the noise when we're selling into the market and trying to help the market understand it's not a one-size-fits-all type of AI solution, and we could use some help around that.
Stan, one thing I've heard you talk about, we've talked about together, is the ways in which in other areas where we have seen, particularly thinking about research in AI, how we build these data sets and build these algorithms, is, we've relied on tools like institutional review boards or ethics boards, and again, these are tools that Congress put in place. We follow the rules set by Congress, and if we don't follow those rules, we're breaking a law. But as long as we follow them, it's a case of the government not being heavy-handed. It's a pretty light touch regulation. Is there room for that here, or is this just too complicated?
No, and in fact, it's spot on. And when you think about tools, I think there's a couple that the companies can immediately kind of implement. And this type of an AI ethics board, AI ethics committee that can be internal standing and meet certain criteria that we're actually working on for, what does good look like? What's a best practice? Have a convened committee, have appropriate triggers. What's their advisory authority? Is there a veto power within the organization? Is there independence in the decision making? All the things that you have for an IRB, typically for research, but applying it into an ethics, to an AI world, internally makes a lot of sense. And in conjunction with that is, in fact, an external capability of a board or a review board that has AI understanding, so that they can be an independent look if a company is uncomfortable still where they are, and their internal board says, we just need someone else. They either bring an external party in or they go. Now, California regs, Colorado regulations, currently, it's in their privacy regulations, but it's AI specific, in that they are going to require external participants on review, on risk assessment, and you have to turn those risk assessments into the California authorities, right? I mean, so this is starting to force companies to really kind of focus in on this issue, and I think it's going to be a pretty significant step, I hope, in addressing some of the bigger risk issues we may be facing.
And do you see that, Amy, as helping or just like another hoop to jump through?
More
Be
the
hon-
latter,
be honest,
honestly,
yeah.
because I mean, what we do is we're deriving insight out of human conversations, right? So one of the things that really irks me is this idea around accuracy. Well, do you know how AI accuracy is determined? It's determined by humans who are looking at what the AI predicted and deciding if it was right or wrong. Well, guess what? When you're analyzing human conversations, two humans can't agree on what was said. So AI accuracy takes a ton. Like determining AI accuracy, at least in unstructured data, requires a lot of effort, inter-rater reliability. And so if we hand that off to a third-party review board, they don't even understand. It worries me.
And it should, because, and again, that's not an appropriate topic for a review board. The topic the more appropriate topics are, we're thinking about, using AI to identify children that may have a predisposition to ADHD, right? And we want to grab medical records and analyze, is that even a topic we should be thinking of? What is the possible use? There was actually a study done in Georgia about a decade ago where the penitentiary ran a study with outside reviews of inmates who were going on to parole, and they did fMRI brain scans, and they actually identified a biomarker that they felt identified the likelihood of recidivism or someone committing another crime after they were on parole. And no one thought to ask, why? What, are you actually going to deny someone parole because they have a biomarker? I mean, that's the kind of thing that an ethics committee would look at and say, there's no reason to do this. And their response was, well, we want to be able to educate these people, educate everyone, right? Why pick the people with a biomarker? And so there's uses like that are going to become much more common with the power of AI. And that's what we're really worried about. There should be a triggering mechanism that somewhere someone is looking at, this is just an insane idea.
So I want to raise a slightly different subject, but I thought about it a lot actually while watching some of the Senate workshop hearings going on about AI, and that is the importance of context. That a pig in a farm is a wonderful thing, and a pig in your bedroom is a little more troubling. And it seems like AI raises much this same issue. So, I flew back from London in January. I had my passport in my hands, and I never needed it the whole way. The airlines used facial recognition on me. The immigration service used facial recognition on me. In fact, as I walked through the hallway, a man in a uniform sitting at a terminal that had obviously read my passport when I looked at the machine said, "Welcome back, Mr. Kate." And I'm like, well, he has my picture on his screen. It recognized me. And in that setting, it felt terrific. It felt like I was home. It felt efficient, like maybe I won't even have to carry a passport one day. There are other settings where, of course, facial recognition feels really creepy. And it seems like maybe less likely that technology is going to help separate those as much as some form of regulation or contract or standards or something that's going to say, as much as we do in other settings, you can use my data, my image, my whatever. Think about all of the cases we've had even before deep fakes with pictures taken in one context being used in another context. So do you see a pathway? At least two of you are optimists here, so I'm feeling really good about this.
Tempered optimism.
There you are.
I mean, if I'm not optimistic, then I'm in trouble because I'm running this company, right?
Okay, so
better
tell
be
me about
optimistic.
context. Can we protect it with law? Can we identify where this may work, or with something else? I'm not saying it has to be law, or if once it's out there, once you get facial recognition, once you develop that tool, it's going to be used for bad things too.
Well, I think you can. I'm not going to pretend that the policy-making process is going to be anything but iterative and messy at times, but that's the nature of our system. And so we have a choice. We can either, imagine, speculate about which of these various risks are going to manifest and try to address them a priori, and in some instances, on account of the magnitude of the risk, we'll want to do that. I could offer examples, if you like. Creation of a superbug, for example. We've heard of that example often cited. So we're trying to think through the appropriate policy instrument to deal with that, very high impact. We can debate the probability contingency, but in this case, this really concerns me. I mean, I value quite deeply, as do most Americans, our privacy rights, our culture of privacy, norms that have taken hold, and so the question is, what does a law look like? How do you craft rules? Maybe you have some narrow cases we can all agree on, and we wait for a kind of a broader sweep policy making approach until we have more clarity about the future, or we can wait for courts. Courts are very good at this, at hearing particular cases, particular controversies, and resolving those and providing some clarity to us through case law. So I think both actually have to happen in parallel. That is what's happening right now. I'll say this, however. This is going to put a big burden on Congress, especially in the wake of this Chevron ruling that said we can't rely on people in departments of government, the unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats that we make fun of all the time and we lament, and they are unelected, they are unaccountable sometimes, but we rely on them to fill in, like, very consequential gaps in our law right now. We're going to have to start to be more functional in Congress and actually start lawmaking again. And so I think you're going to have to insist that your members of Congress are holding more hearings and addressing pressing challenges in a way that we haven't I haven't seen in the last generation or so.
That sounds wonderful. I love that.
I mean, that's the headline from what we've been saying. Because if we don't have that, it seems like we're in trouble. I mean, that's when we look like Europe or we look like someplace else.
And yes, I suppose we're behind in a sense, other countries, but there's also an advantage of backwardness. We're learning from the suboptimal policies that they've put forward. It seems to me that the Europeans, for example, have maybe, I understand why they went ahead and acted, but they've jumped out pretty far, and they've run the risk of constraining innovation. We can figure out how to strike a more appropriate balance, I think, going forward. So that's the positive side to not acting immediately, right? Which is why we have our checks and balances. This is like part of our government.
Regarding the context, I mean, I think in some ways also the market will determine, which would become a case law example, but I think the market will determine in what context they want AI and what context they want human. And honestly, we all have to decide that, right? I'm a mother of 4 kids. ChatGPT is extremely tangible. They're going to school. Their teachers have started saying no more, they're back to pen and paper now to avoid all that. I think we have to decide, what experiences in life will be enabled by AI and what do we want to preserve our humanity with? And we need to be intentionally thinking about that. And I think that what I see and what worries me a lot is even our business buyers and consumers of AI, I feel like it's just kind of on autopilot and we need to engage. There's no more, well, that's a tech thing, the techies will figure it out. It's inundating our entire lives. We need to decide as Americans, as consumers, how do we want our lives to look after AI is fully proliferated in our environment, and we need to be talking to our legislators about that, and I just think it's a really important thing, and I'd like to see the public engage.
I don't know that they're educated. Collectively, any of us are educated enough. I don't want to be that phrase to be misconstrued by the camera. So I think there's a public education and an awareness component to this as well. And this was a recurring theme in each of the 9 insight forums that we had in Congress. Everyone suggested you need to get some basic information out there about what AI is, and what risks might exist, how it can positively impact your lives. And I think we need to start there. And I also have 4 children, and they're starting to learn some of these things through school. So that's encouraging.
You know, I would say too, Fred, and you've talked about this a lot. The idea that current laws, and by the way, 100% agree that our time now is for privacy law and federal. It wasn't 10 years ago. I mean, we've innovated at a pace way more advanced than any other country, in large part because we had this ability to collect data and innovate with it. But most of the laws that exist now that are regulating AI and privacy and data are collection based, and they're like, minimum necessary, only collect what you need, and it's collection. It's get consent for collection and use, or there's notice and collection, and really almost there's very little of it targeted toward the use of the technology, the use of the data. And so, that's an inappropriate use. That's an appropriate use. And that's where we're going to have to get. I mean, we're going to have to talk about the idea that, you can collect sensitive data. You can't use it to then discriminate, right? So we have some anti-discrimination laws. We just don't have appropriate use understanding. Like, this is exactly what we want to use the data for. And so those conversations are going to have to be a part of this, because the current context of these laws is not contextually derived enough to actually work.
Well, and I not only agree with that, but I think it's a real risk in the area of AI that if we follow the same path we've often used in privacy, which is what I would call a sort of almost exercise in bureaucracy. Like, do you have the right notice in the right place at the right time, and the check off, and every time I access my computer, it asks if I agree to cookies, and I think 98% of people don't know what cookies are, and they do know what cookies are, but they think they can eat them. And then you get that wonderful thing, do I want to manage my cookies? Well, I just want yes or no. I don't want to manage anything when I'm going online. But I do think, Amy, one thing you said, which I'm not trying to be philosophical, but about sort of AI versus humanity. Like, how much of our humanity are we willing to give up to AI? And my question really to all 3 of you is, can we do both? I mean, in other words, can AI be used right, be a preserver of humanity, a strengthener of humanity?
Yeah, well, you're speaking my love language right now. I mean, our mission is to help humans understand humans, not to help AI understand humans. AI is a tool. AI is a tool, and our vision is to use AI to listen and help interpret for people who are empowered to make big decisions in healthcare, to understand us consumers of healthcare, and to use your own voice to scale empathy, really, at the policy decision and organizational leadership level. And we use the actual human voice as part of our product. So yes, of course, we're aggregating the trends and the topics and the emotion and the themes and all of those things that you need to have as leaders to know if you should be paying attention to this issue or not. But then we always incorporate the human voice, and we have found that listening to the human voice for our clients is the key in reminding them of their own humanity. So now it's not just a data chart or a trend line. I'm hearing what that actually sounds like for my customers. I got to go act. And so that's, I guess, our way of trying to preserve humanity and also be an AI company, in the world.
Stan? Todd, any comments on humanity here?
No, I'm going to defer to Senator. I think it's an almost impossible lift. I'm not sure how to get the way forward on that. I'm not.
So I think as individuals come to trust AI solutions offered in the market and have some visibility into their operation, most of this will be, there will be a market incentive to provide. Here's how we're, why you can trust our AI solution. Here is how we're offering transparency. But I think over a period of time, there will have to be trust built up that we have institutions that can address bad actors, through which we can receive recompense when we feel like our norms of behavior that we accept are violated. And we're not there yet. And I also think back to public information and education, I think there's a really important role to be played in these early stages about public education and awareness about this. And I'm not just saying that because I have legislation that would provide for that, but that's one of the reasons I'm mentioning it. Yes.
And I mean, Fred, if you go back to what you were talking about earlier with research, right? I mean, there was a history of research prior to IRBs that we fell into a pit on how research was conducted and the lack of ethics, and then we righted that ship with the common rule and with institutional review boards who then could oversee and approve research as being beneficial to the public. And that construct, it was there because laws themselves couldn't make that determination, and it had to be humans looking at it and making decisions around what's appropriate or not. And I do think that construct is going to play a role in this future.
So we have just over a minute left, and you can obviously say anything you want because I wouldn't be capable of stopping any of you. But the thing I'd like to ask you, the three of you seem to have like a bevy of children. I have none. So what do you tell them about AI, or what do they tell you? Maybe you just want to pick one thing. Stan, do you want to start?
They typically tell me to stop worrying about it. I mean, that they're a generation that has grown up with this technology, that they're getting used to the AI, that they intuitively understand what's appropriate or not. And so they're much more comfortable with the future than I am, because I'm old, and I think everything is wrong based at, if it's after the 80s. But I think that they are very much more comfortable with what they perceive as coming.
Amy?
I mean, their mom is an AI founder, so I think they support it. They support it. They're all about it. But also, what I tell them is you need to work on your own brain, and you need to work on how you're going to relate to technology and how you're going to lead. And you have to focus on you as a how you're going to continue to evolve as the technology evolves all around you.
My children, like almost all children I find in this generation, are pretty savvy, and they don't want indoctrination from their parents. So I try and show rather than tell a lot. I show them how they can make amazing movies. They're not very interested in yet, but they'll get there someday. So I'm trying to inspire some interest and also excite them about the amazing possibilities of this technology and its evolution. Beyond that, I just sent my oldest daughter off to Indiana University, and she's...
Thank you.
Yes, a fantastic university, but I don't... And she has sort of resolved, I think, what she wants to do with her life. I am encouraging her to swirl some sort of technological education training into that, because I do think that something we haven't discussed, the workforce disruption possibilities are really significant, and we'll normalize, we'll get used to this, but we need to begin preparing for it. So that's what I emphasize.
Super, thank you. So first of all, thank you all so much for joining us here. We really appreciate it, and please join me in thanking our panelists, exceptional leaders in each of their fields in sort of helping to bring the brave new future forward in a way that isn't more threatening than it absolutely has to be. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, Fred.